True dialogue is a back and forth interaction. True conversation has both people expressing and listening equally over time. Now, not in every given moment. You want to figure out like what your time zone is. Within an hour, did you both get 50%? Or is your thing more like in a week? Do we both get 50%? Or is your time frame more like over the course of a month? Do we each get 50%? But you're kind of thinking through the lens of looking for balance. So one thing that you're balancing is that both people are actively speaking and listening. So if you find yourself defaulting into holding space for someone else, and you are empathizing, so you're taking on the role of listener, and then they feel like you're listening so well and they're getting all their needs met, there will be a point in the conversation where you will want that to switch. You will have some things coming up that you would also like to say. And it sounds like you have two challenges. One, if you're thinking about the other person is that they're doing something wrong, or that you have a different opinion, or there's some difference, it sounds like part of the problem there is, how do I express that? How do I express that difference without necessarily, I think you said something like, it's not my place to give my opinion. Okay, so this is a belief, right? It's not my place to give my opinion. I always just ask for permission. I always say, I have a different opinion on this. Do you want to hear it or not? And then they may not want to hear it, but I still have made it clear that I see it a little differently. Or I might say, you know, as I'm listening to you going through all of this, I have a little bit of a different perspective. Do you think that would be helpful to hear or not? So if I'm going to come in with my head, if I'm going to come in with an analysis or an interpretation or an opinion or a thought, right? If I'm wanting to share cognitive data, I always ask permission for that. Partly because that kind of cognitive difference is more likely to lead to conflict and to stir up defensiveness and resistance in the other person than speaking from my heart. So if I feel an impulse to share something a little more cognitive, I usually just ask, I see this differently. Do you want to hear it? I have some ideas about that. Do you want to hear them? You know, there are a bunch of strategies that worked for me. Would it be helpful to hear those or not yet? So I will identify the kind of data that is wanting to come out, and I'll ask. Now, partly why I do this is because I'm wanting to match how I'm showing up in a way that meets both of our needs. So if I have a need to share and contribute and express something, and the thing that's alive for me tends to be more cognitive, I want to be careful and I want to be respectful of that. And I want to find out if it's a match. There are times when every one of us wants strategies, or we want to debate an idea, or we really want to get some divergent opinions because we're stuck in an echo chamber and we don't even know what we're missing. That can be really rich and valuable when both people want it. But if I'm telling you about my pain and about things that have been triggering, and actually I'm more about my history and my relationship with myself, and you uninvited come in with, well, you know what you should do about that, or, you know, you're completely wrong about this, you should X, Y, Z, it's going to miss me. It's going to miss me where I'm at, and that might feel painful and invalidating, right? So far, are you following? Just checking, you can just nod or you can ask a question. Okay, all right. So I can also say, when you say, I feel kind of unseen, right? So let's just reframe that into sort of classical nonviolence. Classical nonviolence would say, you know, I feel some pressure arising in me and I realize that I have a need to be seen and heard. If you're talking to somebody who's practicing nonviolent communication, you could say that because they'll understand what you're doing. If you're speaking to somebody who is not practicing nonviolent communication, I probably wouldn't say it that way. I'd probably say something like, there's some stuff coming up in me. Do you feel like hearing it or not? I might also say, you know, what is it that you're needing as I'm listening? What kind of listening would you like from me? And then I know, you know, how to focus. Now let's take a few steps back. Anytime that we are in any kind of conversation or engagement with another person, the very first thing that we're always tracking on the inside is our intention. Why am I in this conversation or in this relationship? What is my deep intention in being in this conversation with you? And remember, we oversimplify it and we divide it into one of two things. Either my intention is to connect with you deeply. I want to connect with you. I want to understand you. I want to be in a space of shared humanity with you. I want to deepen our understanding and connection with one another as we are. Or I'm listening a little bit more evaluatively and a little bit more, critically. And my intention is to control or change something. So if my intention is to control or change something, so for example, change your mind, or for example, show you how to do something differently, and you're not asking for that. Very often, if that's my intention, and I speak unconsciously from that place, I will get met with resistance and defensiveness on the other end. And then we end up in power struggles. And they can be subtle power struggles and they can be overt power struggles. But that's often what happens. So one of the things that, Marshall Rosenberg would recommend, a lot of people recommend, is start with the intention to connect. Start with the intention of really getting the experience for both people of being seen and known as they are, with no agenda for change and no evaluation of rightness and wrongness. And so then the practice becomes, as I'm hearing you say that, you then hid your children's devices all around the house to punish them for blah, blah, blah. I noticed that I start feeling some tension in my body. I noticed that what starts happening is I start feeling sorry for your kids. Tell me more about what you're trying to accomplish by doing that. So that might be a way of beginning to bring in a little bit of my subjectivity and a little bit of my reaction without it being like, oh my God, I can't believe you do that. Don't you know that punishing behavior is just going to make everything worse? Right? So there's a lot of ways that we can hold the data that is coming up in us. Some of it, and what we're striving for, is something that honors the dignity and the freedom of choice in the other person, while giving ourselves permission to reveal what's happening in us. And if you can reveal what's happening in you, not from your mind, but from your heart, by talking about what you're feeling and talking about the needs that are up, and then asking a question that is designed to build understanding, not evoke an explanation, you'll be on the right track at least. So I'm hoping I've kind of address that. Here's the other thing. In looking at the question that you put in there, I would also say the thing that you wrote in that question to me would be something you could make explicit and hold together. Like you could literally say, dear friend, I've noticed something happening. I have this dilemma sometimes in our conversations, and I'm not sure how to hold it. I want to tell you what my inner conflict is, and maybe we could think together about what we could do about it. Sometimes when you're talking, I feel like I'm having one reaction and I'm judging you and I'm having all of these criticisms, or we can make that very soft, right? Like I have these reactions coming up and I have such a deep intention to be there for you and empathize with you that I sometimes don't know if there's room for me to tell you when I'm disagreeing with you or when I see it differently. What would it be like to hear more of that from me? How could I share that in a way that would feel good to you? Are you interested in knowing that about me or not? I mean, there's all kinds of things that you could ask at that point. So sometimes just making the inner conflict explicit and inviting the other person to care about it with you can be another move.